Yeah, cool. We're live.
Okay.
Welcome everybody who's tuned in. Welcome to Open Rooms with Andrew Miksys. This is the third event in our Time We Call Our Own online series. So this is a series of live streams that we're producing in conjunction with the Time We Call Our Own exhibition. So this is an exhibition that's all about the way that music scenes and kind of different party cultures worldwide nourish different subcultures and act as kind of like crucibles for various sort of forms of identity around the world. I'm also really happy to announce that we now have an opening date for the exhibition. So that's going to be opening on the 3rd of September in Liverpool. So if you are around, if you're in Liverpool and you have the capacity to come and visit, by all means, come down. Cool. So today we're joined by Andrew Miksys, who's presenting his project Disko. So Disko is essentially about clubbing in the ruins of the USSR. So it's about parties that take place across Lithuania, in former Soviet offices, in prisons, in municipal facilities. So throughout the 2000s, Andrew was touring Lithuania and he was finding parties and getting to know the people who ran them. And Andrew, I'm just going to read out a quote you gave in an interview that I feel like sort of sums up the project quite well, or forms a nice sort of in. You said that Lithuania changed a lot during the 2000s. It went from being a former Soviet republic to an EU member state. Culturally, the shift was quite dramatic. The future was filled with possibility, but the past weighed heavily on everything. The Friday or Saturday night disco was one of the few places in most villages where people could go to feel modern and get a little bit crazy. And with that, I'm going to hand over to you. Take it away.
Okay, cool. Jacob, thank you very much. Thank you, Open Eye Gallery. And it's very cool this is actually happening now.
Yeah.
Everybody knows, well, the exhibition was supposed to be in April, and then everything fell apart, of course, around the world. But it's happening, and we're getting to do kind of weird things like this. Actually did my first Zoom call with Open Eye Gallery about a month ago or something like that to discuss all this. So learning all this new stuff. So it's cool. So the first thing I got to learn is how to share my screen here to show you guys. Let me see. Where do I do this? I'm going to have to put my glasses on here. Jacob, tell me again how to do this.
It's the big old green button at the button. I thought you were a natural. You were smooth
okay, so
last
I
time.
think it's at the bottom of my screen, and it's hidden behind my dock there. Okay.
Classic.
Yeah, so desktop, there you
are. There we go.
And now I have to open this. There we go. Can you see that?
Cool. Yeah, we're in.
See that? So I'm pressing play. Okay, so that's me. That's Andrew Miksys. And all right, so I'm going to go through here. First, I thought I would start with a little geography. I don't know if everybody knows where Lithuania is. So actually, maybe I'll leave full screen so you can see this. You can see my arrow here. So you guys are over here, or Jacob's in London, but Open Eyes here in Liverpool, and I'm over here in Lithuania. I live in Vilnius, but right now I'm in this small village here called Žagarė, and let's see, in Lithuania. And the reason I'm here is because during the Second World War, my grandparents were from Lithuania, on my father's side, and my father. And when the Soviet army was coming to occupy Lithuania at the end of the war, my grandparents decided to leave because, like many Lithuanians, there were kind of a couple choices. You could get sent to Siberia during the occupation, or you could try to leave. So they left, actually. And the very cool thing is my grandfather was kind of a very good amateur photographer. He had a medium format camera, and he photographed their whole trip, a lot of their trips. So these are actual photographs of the day they left Lithuania. And they left on a horse and buggy, and they went to Germany on this horse and buggy. And I grew up in Seattle, far away from my grandparents who lived near Boston. And I wasn't part of any Lithuanian community, so I didn't know a lot about Lithuania growing up. And actually these negatives, my grandfather gave me these negatives when I started studying photography. And that's kind of how I got into Lithuania. And then in the 90s, I came back to Lithuania to visit some relatives, and that kind of, everything grew from there. And then I got a grant live here for a year, and that's how the Disko project started. And then here's a photograph of my father when he got to the U.S. On the Staten Island ferry. So the project for the exhibition at the Open Eye Gallery is my Disko project. And I started this kind of by accident. I was in a small town, a little village, and I saw some kids going into this building, this old kind of Soviet building. And they were carrying some beers, like some cases of beer. And I was like, what is going on here? And I followed them in, and I found this kind of amazing space where they were having a disco party. I'll show you some of those pictures from the first one a little bit later. And that's how I ended up doing this project. And later on, I realized that a lot of small towns and villages in Lithuania had these cultural centers that worked as discos on the weekends. So here's the cover of my book. Actually, I have a copy here. This is the original first edition. I saw Adam, the curator, Adam Murray. Thank you, Adam. I forgot to mention Adam, who he found my books in, that's why I'm in the exhibition. He bought my book somewhere. So this is the original first edition. It has this kind of fabric paper material that changes colors. It turns green and red when you, in a different light. And on the text on the cover is in Cyrillic, which is Russian. Lithuanians have their own language, Lithuanian, and it's written in a whole different alphabet. But I kind of liked using the Cyrillic on this cover because it kind of referenced these old Soviet spaces and the time when Lithuania was under occupation and where everybody had to learn Russian. So that's why I kind of used this Cyrillic. So I have kind of most of the photographs from the book here in this PDF. And this is inside the book. I changed, this friend of mine, graphic designer, changed the Cyrillic into English to create this kind of disco in English. And here are some of the photographs. This is the first photograph in the book. This was taken in a bathroom in a disco, and it had the reason in the book I use this kind of pink and light blue because that was kind of the way that the colors that defined men and women or girls and boys in a lot of these clubs. And this is the men's bathroom, which was light blue, and then the girls' bathroom was pink. Here's some other, so I'll just go through these a little bit. This one's in a very small town. Lots of guys in my book. There are 2 or 3 photographs of guys who took their shirts off for me when I was photographing, which was kind of awesome and unexpected a little bit. This is kind of what some of the spaces looked like. Very small, just rural, small towns. And the thing I really loved about photographing and something I really appreciated is these small towns and people kind of made their own spaces. They're very organic. They participated in kind of creating the space and being a part of it. There's a girl with a kind of looks like a little, it's an M&M shirt, but probably a bootleg M&M shirt. This one was one of my favorite places to photograph, this little disco in a very small town. Keep going. Let's see. Yeah, I did a lot of stuff like when I was driving, like along the way, just a little bit trying to show how remote the places were, because it was also a little bit weird project to do. It was on Friday and Saturday nights. All my friends were in Vilnius partying. You know, Vilnius was changing, and there were all these very contemporary kind of bars and clubs opening up. And I was going out to these very remote villages, and this is like what the roads would look like. And it would take me a couple hours to drive to these places and photograph. Let's see, I can So I photographed a lot of things like this along the way as I was going there. Let me just go out of this PDF here, or this PowerPoint here. I'll show you. Skip ahead here. This is the first place I photographed. This club. This is where I followed these kids in, and I found this space. And you can see the design, and it was all left over from the Soviet Union. And if you can see behind the girl, there's this star, like this red star shape. And in the middle is this Lenin head, this metal Lenin head. This is not in my book. This is just a picture that I took. And I was just like, I came to Lithuania and I'm photographing, and I was really interested in the fall of the Soviet Union. And, I grew up as an American, and it's like our mortal enemy is the Soviet Union. But my father was from this place that was occupied. And, I was kind of obsessed with all this, Soviet stuff. And then here I am in this little disco, and there's a Lenin head on the wall. And this is like 1999, 2000. And it's a little weird it still exists, that it's still there, because Lithuanians, the first thing they did was tear down all the Lenin statues and all this stuff. So this club, I was just like, wow, this is like crazy. And the bartender in this place, like I used to pose people against this as much as I could and trying to get a shot, but the only one that really came out was this one. And here, so the bartender realized I loved like this Lenin, and I was trying to get a photograph of somebody in front of it. And on the last, I was photographing there. Here's Lenin here. It's this metal cast iron Lenin. And I was photographing in this place, and the bartender said they were going to close the bar and renovate, and she gave me this Lenin head as a gift. And so when I was driving home that night, I had Lenin in the passenger seat as I was going home, which was kind of, I don't love Lenin. It's not funny. He's not a funny person or anything like that, but it was really like this kind of culmination of all this stuff, like thinking about the Soviet Union and how it fell apart. And here I was with this Lenin head driving home. There's another kind of interiors of how the spaces looked. And yeah, I've tried to photograph like around the discos, like what the towns looked like. This is a kind of classic Eastern European blockhouse. This girl, she went to this disco in this small town, and then one day I was driving through there, and she was on the side of the road, and I just love these. In my book, there's a lot of pictures of hearts, and she had these, it looks like homemade hearts pants, but I'm not sure if they were homemade or not. Yeah, the road along the way. This was really cool. This girl, I photographed her, and then somehow online she discovered my book, and she got my book, and she wrote to me, and she lives in the UK somewhere. I can't remember where she lives. Her name's Tatiana. And she remembered this photograph because it was her 16th birthday. So she wrote to me and telling me all about how she remembers this day when I photographed her. Kind of got obsessed with all the different kinds of disco balls and these very kind of, you can see the roof. It's almost like a barn, like a kind of village barn in this disco. Okay, let me see what else I have here. Skipping ahead a little. Talk about some of this. Adidas is always big in these kind of small towns and in Lithuania. Also, there were some fights sometimes when I was in the discos. This one was, this happened, I was photographing in this disco, all the light, it was very dark, and all of a sudden all the lights came on, and these two guys were in the middle of this disco fighting. And one guy like broke a beer bottle or something and cut his hand. And I ran away. I went outside because I didn't want to be in the midst of all this. And but when I came back inside, there was this blood on the floor, and I photographed him. Let's see. Skip ahead here. All right. So one thing in my book, I wrote a text about different things I found in the discos because it was kind of amazing. These discos was this old, like this Soviet history that had kind of crumbled, and but still there'd be like the disco, and they'd have some rooms in these cultural centers, and they'd have stuff left over from the Soviet Union. So this one place had a big movie theater with projectors that wasn't working anymore. For the cultural center, he took me back there, and there were all these movie posters from the Soviet times. So this is a movie poster, and it's written in Lithuania at the top, and it says "Victory." It's like a classic Soviet propaganda movie. Have this whole collection of all these posters that this director gave me. I found more Lenins, like in some of these rooms and some of the spaces. And also a lot of the cultural centers, they would collect like the history of the cultural center, and they would have these albums of photographs. And so some of the directors of the cultural centers, they would let me scan the photographs. And for a while I thought I was going to do this kind of archival photographs with my photographs, but I didn't end up doing that, just with the text in my book. But there were all these really great things. It's like from the like late 70s, 80s, and it's these guys playing in the cultural center with this Lenin and at an event. Photographs of like pioneers. It's kind of like the Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts, or scouts from the Soviet Union. And this one I used in my book. This is the one archival photograph that was kind of amazing. There was this cultural center, and they had the history of the cultural center in photographs in this album. And so the director was letting me look through it, and I was looking at everything, and then I came across this photograph, and it's a photograph taken at the opening of the cultural center. But somebody, the director or the librarian, had taken a pen and crossed out whatever was written on the top of the building. And so I was writing a text for my book about this photograph and some other things, kind of wondering what's behind that pen. Like, Lithuania became independent in the 90s, but then the librarian, decided the Soviet history is gone, so we can just cross it out with a pen in this album, The History of the Cultural Center. And when I was making my book, the guy who does my pre-press for my books, he said, he told me he could take the black ink away, and he did. And underneath was written this text about the October Revolution, about the Russian Revolution. And it's like it says something like all the rewards from our work are for the October Revolution, and it's written in Lithuanian and in Russian. So that was kind of cool, and so I talk about that in the book, in the text. Let's see, what else? Here. Yeah, fine, okay. Just keep going through this a little bit. Okay, I can talk about this. We have time here. There's one thing that was really kind of...
You've got time, Andrew. Don't rush. It's cool.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I have a little water here, that really fascinated me about going to these small towns and villages was that they were, before the war, before the Second World War, many of them were these Jewish shtetls that were almost, primarily they were Jewish little villages. And Lithuania, before the Second World War, had this, they called Vilnius, the capital of Lithuania, was called the Jerusalem of the North. It was because it was where the diaspora before Israel became Israel. It was like where Jewish diaspora lived. And Yiddish from Vilnius is kind of this very important there are all these books and authors and poets and everything from Vilnius. But some of these small towns before the Second World War were very Jewish. And I didn't really realize where I was photographing sometimes, but there's this town in this fascinating place where I've done a couple projects about. It's called Ešeškis in Lithuanian. In Yiddish, it would be called Ešešuk, is the Yiddish name for it. And there was a disco there, one of the main discos that I photographed at. And these towns are really cool because they really show this kind of, before the Second World War and still today, Lithuania was very multi-ethnic. It had this sign, it's a street sign. It's in Lithuanian, Polish, and Russian. And a lot of these towns had this whole mix of different people, and which I really liked. So this was a cultural center. This is not in my book or anything. I just took this picture to document it, where I did a lot of photography. And I discovered later, after I was photographing, that it was one of the main synagogues in this little town. And this here's a photograph from inside the disco, the speaker and lights. But before the war, it was a synagogue. And next to that synagogue, which is a cultural center now, there's this huge synagogue. A lot of these towns, they had two synagogues. One was like the big one sometimes would be a summer synagogue, which you didn't have to heat, so it's a much bigger space. And then in the winter, they would have this smaller space. So this is the much bigger space that was also a synagogue, and it was a sports hall during the Soviet Union. That's why it has this kind of roof and everything. So then later, also, I visited the U.S. Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C., and there's this whole amazing, I don't know, maybe some people have seen this before, it's this amazing space at the Holocaust Museum, which is, all it is family photographs taken in this town, Ešeškis, before the Second World War. It's super powerful. It's like simple. It's not like some images of a concentration camp or anything like that. It's just these very simple, you know, the photographer from that town took pictures of weddings and funerals and stuff like that. And so if you ever go to the U.S. Holocaust Museum, it's a permanent exhibition. And so it's from this town that I was photographing in. And the woman who made this, found all these photographs and the histories of all the people in the photographs. She was one of the founding members who started the U.S. Holocaust Museum. So that was kind of amazing. And Obama on on the Holocaust Memory Day would always go to the U.S. Holocaust Museum, and he would stand in this space. So here's a picture of him when he was president. So all that stuff was kind of like this in the background of what I was doing, sort of. I couldn't specifically photograph it, but it was kind of like all these layers of history, you know, the Soviet history, this pre-war history that kind of informed what I was doing. I can't say it like came out in the photographs all the time, but it was something that was I was really interested in. This was the first kind of disco album from Lithuania. It's on the playlist that Jacob has for after this talk, one of the songs. And it's kind of weird. It's not like Saturday Night Fever disco. I have a vintage copy. Look this up on Discogs or somewhere and check the price now. This is a vintage one that was put out there in the Soviet in 1982. And it's kind of, he was a composer, so it's kind of this disco folk synth mix. It's really bizarre, super bizarre. And the Lithuanian Cultural Ministry supported it. They bought Makachinas, that's the name of the composer. They bought him a synthesizer to make the album. I don't know, there's this kind of mythology story that the Cultural Ministry paid something like $5,000 to buy the synthesizer to import it to Lithuania so he could make this record. So this is this, I also talked about this in my book, as just sort of a little background for the book. Okay, I can talk a little bit about design, about how I made my book, because I'm really into bookmaking. That's one of the main like if you're going to make a project, my sort of final thing that I want to make is a book. Like I feel like a book, you know, when I made my disco book, you know, it's all about the materials, the fabric. This is puffy, you know, it's this puffy material. And then, you know, you kind of like, you can really make it like a movie, you know, like through the editing, the sequencing, how you want somebody to engage with your project, with your, you know, with your book. And so for me, that's kind of the ultimate thing to do. So, and with Disko, I self-publish all my books. I have my own imprint called A-Rock. It's here. But mostly I just do my own books. That's what I do. Jacob, I'm taking a little beer break here and have a little sip.
You do you.
All right. So the really interesting thing, the really great thing that happened with Disko I started working with this graphic designer named Claudia Ott. She's from Dusseldorf, Germany. And we hadn't worked together. She speaks basically just German. She only writes in German, and I don't speak any German. I don't write in German or anything like that. But I knew I really liked, she did like Michael Schmidt's books, like this book, Unity. It's a really great book. Very simple, very stark, you know, and I just really liked her design. But we started talking about Disko a little bit, but we didn't really talk about it because as I said, I don't speak German and she doesn't speak English. So she started designing and she came up with this design for the cover. And this is what she came up with. It's like this kind of, and on inside it has this, you know, this kind of yellow and this blue and everything. And if you're making books, like if you're really into bookmaking, one of the most important relationships is with your graphic designer. And some people think, there are a lot of photographers out there who think, oh, I can design my own book or whatever. For me, I can't do that. It's really, it's like a whole different thing. And I really appreciate graphic designers. So Claudia sent me this and I was like, no, we're not understanding each other. We have to kind of have a discussion about this because this is not my style. So I started sending her like just weird stuff that this today is not so politically correct, but when I was in college in the late 80s, 90s, there were these toy stores, Toys R Us, and they sold all this Michael Jackson stuff. And I bought this Michael Jackson doll, different outfits. And I started sending her this kind of like, I want to make it more pop, a little bit more weird, you know, for the cover. I sent her this glossy, this was my wallet when I was making the Disko book, you know, with all this glitter and everything. And so we could have more of a dialogue about how the book should be. And from that, we were able to design the book. And then for the cover, for a long time, I didn't know what to do. And a friend of mine was playing music from this 80s Russian disco album on his iPhone one time. And I happened to look at his iPhone when he was playing it. And I saw this graphic from the album. And this is what I used, I copied for the cover of my book. Took the stuff out. And so here's the cover. Again, in this part. And what I really like with working with a graphic designer is the way they can kind of make this structure. And it's very important for me, like when a designer tells me, you know, the images will be 3 different sizes and the structure will be sort of, you know, this is how the flow will be in the book. And from there, then I can really start to work, you know, but before then, for me, it's a little too chaotic. And I've been working with the images so long, it's hard to see them in a book form or in a different way. But with Claudia, it really helped me. She had these kind of full bleed photographs. And then she had these ones that were a little bit smaller. And then images that went across the gutter of the book. And just those 3 sizes, like it really, and then she sent me a kind of like, you know, example of like 10 different layouts, and it really spreads, and it really really helped me make the book. Let's see what else. So these are images from the book, some of the spreads from the book. And
I got a really quick question about this image,
yeah.
and it's one I've always wondered when I've looked at it. Is that a fire behind the barn?
Inside? Oh, no, in the back. Actually, it's headlights from a car.
Right.
But I don't know why it's that color. I don't know what happened. It's like really weird.
Yeah.
But it's not anything I did, you know. It's not.
Yeah.
It could have been like something. There wasn't another window. It looks like it came kind of from the inside of the disco and it's coming out. But there's a car sitting there with
That's
its
like
lights on.
that's just like the risk assessor in me, just zoning
Oh,
in on
it's
the.
on fire.
Yeah. Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, no, this was yeah, just like on a tripod, long exposure, and I think that car just showed up or something. I'm not even sure exactly what happened. But this was like a really classic, great, you know, village disco. This cultural center was made of all wood and kind of, you know, like a barn or a farmhouse or something like that. Okay, so here, I'll talk about this. You guys are in the UK, so I'll talk a little bit about what happened with this project, because for me, I was just making this project about these kids and, you know, like, you know, how they, you know, found something to do in these very remote places, in these small towns and villages on the weekends. And for me, it was about celebrating kind of like what they're doing, you know, and how amazing they are, like how they, um, you know, they just, you know, creating something for themselves, a way to meet each other, and, you know, in these kind of remote places. But in Lithuania, like it kind of turned out a little bit different. And what happened was the Daily Mail, which I know it doesn't have the best, it kind of has a little reputation, a little tabloid, but they do these kind of nice articles about, I don't know, say nice. They were doing these articles about different photography projects. And I knew some photographers who they'd done stories about. So they wrote to me and they said, oh, we want to do a thing about your, uh, your disco project in Lithuania. So I was like, okay, fine. And I just sent them some photographs. They didn't interview me or anything like that. And if you read the article, it's not very historically correct. It's a little sensational about, you know, how these kids are living in these small towns, but it wasn't anything terrible. I didn't think it was like terribly written or anything like that. But like 2 days later in Lithuania, the biggest newspaper in Lithuania, starts writing these stories about my project and how I'm doing something like very subversive against Lithuania. It was like this totally bizarre kind of thing. So this was the first article that came out just a couple days after that Daily Mail article. And it's the Lithuanian embassy in London. It's still on their Facebook page. They translated it into English and put the article on their Facebook page. So you can still find this on their Facebook page. And what they did is they found some British guy who's living in Lithuania to ask him about my photography. He's not some art expert or any kind of cultural expert or anything like that. So he comes up with this idea that you can see the headline of the article. British citizen living in Lithuania sees evidence of conspiracy in scandalous photos. So he claims it's like just crazy. He says like the Daily Mail article was, such articles are published, this is a quote from him, such articles are published in the West in order to prevent Westerners from investing in Lithuania. And you got to read the whole article. It's like crazy town. It's like that my photography is going to damage the economy of Lithuania if people see it, you know? It was just like, I was like, what? I was like, I'm just trying to make a book, man. Like, you know, it's like really, you know, I'm still, it's like, you know, and so it was, yeah, so this happened. Then I don't think I have screenshots of it, but then the journalist started writing to me on Facebook, like, you have to do an interview with us. They created a scandal out of nothing. And then they wanted me to talk about it. They wanted to interview me and talk about it. And I was like, no, I'm not talking to you guys. You know, it's just like, just ridiculous. So, but anyways, people were really clicking on these articles, so they kept publishing them. So this is the best one. This is for all you guys in the UK. It's in Lithuania. It says, Kas Beisau, Lietuvos kaimo šokiai arba Britų orgios. So in English, it's like, what's worse, Lithuanian village discos or British orgies? Okay. So I sued them, I said, because they were using my photography without my permission. So they started publishing these articles about, so they're comparing my photography about these villages with these photographs they found online. So here's a girl supposedly in Great Britain somewhere with her pants down after a bar, peeing in the street. These are the photographs they put, like comparing my disco photographs with these photographs. Some guy in a toilet somewhere. So yeah, so that was kind of the kind of bizarre, crazy thing that happened with the project after when I published it. And then the newspaper at the end of the year, they do a thing of like the top 20 most important things in Lithuanian like media for the year. And my disco book about all this stuff made it to number 5. So I was number 5 for the year. So I sent this to my parents. So that's what I have. I can talk more if you want, or if you need.
I mean, I got a bunch of questions for you.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you so much for giving us the tour through it all. It's such a multifaceted project that goes off in all these different directions. I didn't know about the reception of it, and the kind of like it's sort of strange sort of percolation through the weird media environment. Something you mentioned that I forgot to mention at the start is that yes, like Andrew's put together a mixtape of Lithuanian club music. I've had a little like peek at it. It's great. It's really good fun. So after this stream, I'm going to set up a new stream here in the Twitch. That's the Time of Color on Radio episode 2, and we're going to hang out, listen to the music, and we'll also be chatting in the Discord. So I think the link to join that is in underneath the video in our bio if you're not already in there. But yeah, by all means, stick around and chat. Also, just quickly like to say thank you to SEVENSTORE for all the support they've given us to this project, and for just like helping us make the whole project a reality. So thank you for your support on that. My first question is, I guess one thing that's really interesting for me about the wider project is the way that quite a lot of these kind of scenes, quite a lot of like sort of party subcultures are quite like can be quite like protected spaces, and that could be through like people's status as like marginalized individuals who are endangered in many cultures. So I'm thinking of like LGBTQ plus communities, or it could be this kind of like you mentioned there was this like attitude that Vilnius had towards these more like regional parties, and like so maybe there's some sense of kind of like a sort of a local like civic like pride within that. I guess what I'm interested in like the role of the photographer as having this kind of like outsider status, but being able to go in a way where they kind of like join the party and it's not kind of like extractive. So I guess I'm interested in like how did you become a part of these communities? Was there ever any like pushback or friction, or like what was your sort of journey into sort of getting into this scene?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, I forget about that sometimes. How it was. They are very tight, close-knit communities, you know, and it was a little. Of course, it was a little tricky at first, you know, and yeah, I try, you know, it's always I think in photography it's this very tricky thing or interesting thing, because to be a photographer and enter into somebody else's life, it's this intrusive thing. So I'm kind of always conscious of that. But I was, you know, a little bit nervous about going to some of these places. But the great thing was usually there were DJs or from my playlist who helped me a lot is this one guy in this town, Pabrade. DJ Playboy, and that's what he went by. And I showed up at this village disco, and it was packed with people, and they had a bar, and so there's lots of stuff going on, and like, you know, some fights and stuff. And he just like said, Andrew, what are you doing here? And I really didn't speak Lithuanian that well at that time. And he was like, you know, you know, and he just like, you want to photograph? Great, come on. And he really like said, you're here as our guest, and it's our responsibility to take care of you. And that was kind of the reception I had at all the places. And, you know, some of the guys, like, you know, I'm this guy, you know, I had even had longer hair, and I was showing up in these places, and the guys looked like you, Jacob, you know, very, you know, these big guys with shaved heads, and they really, it was kind of this respect thing that it was their space, and they accepted me. You know, sometimes it would take some explaining what I'm doing there or whatever, and they really, but once they kind of said, okay, that's cool, that's good, then they took care of me, and that was kind of great. One place that was kind of amazing, the guys made me sit down at a table. I came in, and these like 4 guys made me sit down, and there was a bottle of vodka on the table, and I had to kind of prove myself shots, you know, which was, I mean, you know, it's really, you know, these are some of my favorite, you know, memories of the whole project, you know.
I'm thinking about your, like, because you grew up in Seattle, but you're Lithuanian, so you have this kind of like this hybrid identity, and I'm interested in if you draw any. I mean, what DIY party culture essentially does is it reclaims space and time, and it kind of like makes these kind of like previously private spaces become like more negotiable. And like you said, there's a sense of like care in these spaces, the sense of people kind of like looking out for each other. It's like a new way of being together. I wonder if you like draw any connection between like this scene, between the 2000s like DIY party culture in Lithuania, wider kind of party cultures worldwide, and what's happening in Seattle now with the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that would be a big leap to go from a village disco to Seattle, but
I didn't mean like a genealogy. I just meant like a wider kind of like spirit of kind of like
I mean,
reclaiming space.
I really, you know, like what, you know, it happened to me many times. You know, I was photographing in these spaces, and some friend calls me from Vilnius, and they're like, what are you doing tonight? Let's go out. You know, I'm like, well, I'm in this small town, you know, I'm at this disco. It's amazing. And, you know, I was really happy to be there to kind of document those spaces. And, you know, in some ways I'm sad because it's gone. You know, most of it is gone. You know, most of these spaces are gone now because a lot of the kids moved to the UK. You know, I think part of this project, I was in an exhibition at the Maureen Paley Gallery in London, like 3 or 4 years ago. And it was kind of about Brexit a little bit. It was sort of about how, you know, and my project was a little bit about a lot of the kids that I photographed, you know, these guys, you know, with their shirts off, they went to the UK to work. And then they were rejected in a lot of ways by the UK and Brexit and everything, because supposedly those were the people that, you know, the Brexit people didn't want to have there, you know. And so it was kind of this thing. But yeah, Seattle, I mean, Seattle is like a very unique place. I grew up in the 90s, you know, late 80s, 90s, and I saw Nirvana played at my college in the cafeteria. You know, there were like 150 people there. You know, Kurt was wearing a dress, and it was, I mean, that vibe, like, I don't know, maybe it was, you know, my brain was different. I was much younger. Like, it was like, just like, you really felt like you were part of something different, you know, like you were like in this, you know, rejecting certain things. And yeah, so those discos, like, yeah, I kind of had that kind of energy also from that. And the autonomous, and like Seattle, that's just like, that's the great thing about it. I mean, I don't always agree with everything that people are doing, you know, but that autonomous zone, like, yeah, it's like, and the city, what I really love, the governor and the mayor of Seattle, I still vote in Seattle. They're like, this is Seattle. We're doing, you know, we're going to handle this our way. And people are protesting peacefully. Of course, it got to a point, I think got to a point where there were some problems with violence or whatever. And, you know, and the one thing I want to say to all those people, especially my American friends, everybody has to vote. I really think that's the real,
Mm.
I don't know. I think voting is really, I'm sorry, I'm going off on a tangent here, but I'm really obsessed with this voting. Like, it can be very revolutionary if everybody does it, you know. The problem is that the numbers, it's usually, you know, 40, 50% of the people vote.
Mm.
Okay, go, sorry.
I want to pick you up on what you were just saying about like the sense of like rejection, how like a lot of the spirit of these things comes from a place of like not moving towards something but moving away from something, if that makes sense. And it leads into a question from Mariama. She asked, what did it mean culturally in Lithuania to like, what did it mean culturally that these parties were happening in these specific spaces, these like former Soviet spaces? Like, what did it mean culturally to occupy these spaces of bureaucracy and to fill them with like a very different energy?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I think the kind of amazing thing was, for me, was like this, yeah, this big bureaucracy. The Soviet Union was crumbling in the spaces, what you see in my photographs, and then these kids were making something different out of it. And so that's kind of what really drew me to photographing in them.
Quick question about the actual like apparatus of the party. Like I saw there was some really interesting like sound systems there, and like there's that amazing shot of the DJ booth on like the balcony
Yeah, yeah,
overlooking
yeah.
the room.
Yeah, okay, not sharing. Yeah, that place was like, that was at the end of my project when I found that space. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I'm really interested. Yeah, go on. Do you want to pull the photo up?
I'm trying to find it. Hold on one sec.
It's cool.
Yeah.
It's cool.
So it's called
Yeah.
Draco Klubus, like Dragon Club. But this place
Okay.
is like nuts. This is like, so I was photographing a lot along the Belarusian border. Like from Vilnius, I would go like north and along the border. And this was basically the last town. It's called Adutishkis, along the border. And when the Soviet Union fell apart, so then Belarus and Lithuania were independent states, this town literally got divided in half. So the train station stayed in Belarus, it went to Belarus, and the cultural center and a bunch of other stuff went to Lithuania. So this is the cultural center, and super rural. There's no gas station. There's only one little grocery store there. And yeah, the DJs, I found this like at the end of my project. Somebody told me like, I've been photographing in all these towns, and somebody said, yeah, just keep going, keep going, keep going. There's this other town, Dutishkis, and there's another disco there. So yeah, so it's, this is the dance floor. And then the DJ literally, I don't know where it is, has to climb this ladder. And they built all this stuff. Like the director, he's like super cool, like, super cool guy. Like, you know, the kids, they come and they kind of participate and they made all this stuff, you know. So the DJ climbs up the ladder up to this booth and then DJs from the top up there. And they just have these kind of basic lights and the speakers and everything. Amazing place. Totally amazing place.
There was a space in Liverpool called the Bakery that had a similar like ladder sort of turret style DJ setup. I want to ask about sound systems and like the DJs there, because obviously like if you look at like working class kind of like Jamaican music, there's like a real the sound system is like is kind of what the whole culture revolves around and what the whole sort of like crew would revolve around. And there's a nice connection between like these parties, and I'm thinking of like Miriam Wertz's project, which is also part of this program called Sonidero City, where she looks at the neighborhood sound systems around Mexico City and Colombia, and how like for a neighborhood to have a sound system, it would be like there'd be this like camaraderie between different like neighborhoods, like who had the loudest sound system or who had like the best DJs or who had the best records. There's a real kind of sense of like sort of like comradeship and sort of neighborhood like energy to this. The parties, were they like more kind of like, did the sound systems and the DJs roam around Lithuania, or was it more like localized?
Not so much. Yeah. The cultural centers had like their sound systems, and the DJs would come with their music. So it didn't really move that much. No.
So it's like
Miriam is a friend of mine. She lived here in Lithuania. She was,
Oh, for real?
yeah. And we, when I was working on this project, yeah, we talked about it a lot. Like, and Miriam was the manager of the best, for a while, the best place to party in Vilnius.
Sweet.
Yeah.
We'll have to ask about that. She's doing one of these as well in a few weeks. So for
Okay,
sure
cool. Yeah, no,
we'll
I'll
pick her up
totally
on
watch
that.
it. Yeah. She lived here for, I don't know how many years, but yeah, she was here for a few years. Yeah.
Speaking of which, I just want to say a quick hello to my friend Dorian, who I think is watching, who used to throw parties in Moldova. Hey, Dorian. Another question here from Suraha. She says she is interested in whether these spaces were widely known and talked about, or did you kind of have to like ask around to find out about them? And as a follow-up to that, she says the photographs feel very intimate, and she wonders what it was like to document these spaces. Were people like open to being photographed? So I guess like broadly, her question is about like privacy versus publicness in both the actual parties and the act of photographing the parties.
Yeah. Yeah. The places were so remote, they were just for like locals in the town. Sometimes people would drive, some guys would drive to the next village to go to a different disco or something like that, but they weren't really well known. I mean, that's why I wanted to make the project. You know, I was like, oh, I was just amazed at how, you know, what was going on and the people and the vibe and everything. And, you know, like I said, like, I mean, what I didn't, which I always never liked, but like this kind of attitude from some, you know, major urban space. They're like, oh, they're just villagers. They're not doing anything cool, you know, or like whatever. And for me, it was like, but I really like one person went with me one time to one of these discos, but
Like from Vilnius.
yeah. Nobody would go with me. They were all like, no, we're gonna get beat up. No, wait, we can't go there, man. We can't. And I was like, yeah, no, it's amazing. It's amazing. No, you know. So it was like that. Yeah, the privacy thing. I mean, it's all, you know, as I said, like photography is intrusive. I don't have some great, you know, answer to like, you know, why it's okay to take portraits. It's always this very difficult. And I think in my photographs, you see this, there's this tension sometimes, like people are looking at me suspiciously. What are you doing here? Why, you know, or they're, they're looking at me as some way out of the space, out of, you know, Lithuania, beyond, you know. So it's always that kind of thing. And none of my photographs are like secret, you know. I have this huge studio flash that I use. I use film. I use 6x7 film cameras. You know, it's really slow. I have to talk to people, and you know, I mean, of course, I think a lot of photographers, you have this dilemma a little bit, like, you know, maybe I know what I'm going to do with the photographs, but the people I'm photographing, you know, maybe they're not totally, you know, they don't understand that it's going to be a, you know, where it might be or whatever. But I try as much as I can to be like, you know, respectful or showing things as they are. I mean, I think sometimes that's the most respectful thing you can do. And so, yeah, but it's always it's not easy. Yeah.
Last couple of questions before we go into the mixtape. What did it mean to wear Adidas? I'm just thinking about like the fashion. You mentioned it was like Adidas was like the cool thing. Like what other kind of like fashion things were happening, and what statement was wearing Adidas making in Lithuania then?
Well, Adidas is just I don't know. I don't, you know, it's the main brand. It's still like in small towns, it's the main brand for kind of being a little bit tough. You know, it's really what people wear. And BMW, that's the other, you know, BMW cars and Adidas. So, I mean, I did some fashion things later with some fashion brands that kind of riff on Adidas and this kind of Eastern European stuff. But like in those clubs, yeah, it's just the kind of main popular brand.
Cool. And my last question is just simply like how many people would be at these parties, and what would they feel like?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of my photographs, it looks kind of, you know, I'm really interested in portraits, individual people, so it looks, you know, kind of sparse or whatever. But some of them, yeah, it was where DJ Playboy was DJing. It was just packed. I mean, it was like hundreds of people. like in this, and it was also like a wood floor, like weird Soviet decorations, stage with a big red velvet curtain, and yeah, tons of people. But then, as the 2000s went on, Lithuania joined the European Union in 2004, and that's when things started to dramatically change in small towns because people started to leave because they could to go work and whatever study elsewhere.
Cool. We need to try and get DJ Playboy on this, or we need to try and get into the gallery at some point. That would be.
He's killer. He's he actually works now. He's a nurse at a hospital, and he works across the street from where I live in Vilnius.
Oh, sweet. Hey to DJ Playboy if you're watching. Speaking of which, should we shut the stream down and then open the radio stream?
Yeah,
I'm excited to hear these tunes. Cool. Thank you so much for sharing your project with us. Thank you for being part of the exhibition. Like I said, the show is going to open in Liverpool on the 3rd of September. So if you are local, totally come and check it out. Andrew's project is going to be up there. Next week, we have a stream called Save Some Space. So that's going to be Emma Warren, who's like, she is a family member of Total Refreshment Centre, which is like a DIY party space in London. She also wrote a book called Make Some Space that was about the sort of energizing politics and the role of like nighttime spaces in the sort of civic fabric. She's going to be in conversation with Chris Torpy from Bido Lito, which is like a brilliant kind of like local music and art magazine and like events organizer in Liverpool. And also going to be joined by Saad Shafi, who's the co-owner of 24 Kitchen Street, a brilliant, very like cutting edge club in Liverpool, which is currently under threat of closure from property developers in the area. And there's a bit of an ongoing like legal dispute around noise. And we're going to be thinking about like the vitality of these spaces, what these spaces offer, and how we can sort of reframe the value of these spaces within like various kind of like languages in order to advocate for them within the civic fabric. It's going to be good. Anyway, I'll stop talking. I'm going to disappear for a minute, and then I'm going to be replaced with XXL. What's the name of the first tune?
Savaitele. It's like little week.
Cool.
Killer song. Starts with bagpipes.
Yeah. If you can get through the bagpipes, and then we're set.
Get through the bagpipes.
Yeah. It's like
I don't know. Like
it's like the purgatory of the bagpipes.
No, the song just blows me up. Like, why bagpipes? Like, where did they get that from? You know, they're like '90s rappers, like mid '90s bagpipes. You know, it's like great.
Also, we are going to be hanging out in the Discord. So Andrew's going to be there. Come and say hey. Come and ask questions, and come and drop your weird clubbing anecdotes as well, because they're always really good fun.
So Discord is going to be all text, right? Or no?
It's all text. Yeah.
Okay, I'm learning. Good.
You're getting there. All right, cool. Andrew, thank you so much. I'll see you in the Discord, and I'll chat to you soon.
Okay, ciao.
So long.